The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, and I knew before opening it that my peaceful life in Scottsdale, Arizona, was about to get complicated. My name is Jason Yates, and I had been living in the Sagebrush Estates development for exactly 9 months when Patricia Morrison, president of our homeowners association, decided that my converted garage art studio violated some obscure community guideline I had never heard of. The letter was 3 pages long, single-spaced, and filled with references to sections, subsections, and amendments that apparently governed every aspect of our lives in this supposedly idyllic desert community. I stood in my driveway, the Arizona sun beating down on my shoulders, reading about how my unauthorized commercial activity was creating excessive traffic and disturbing the peaceful enjoyment of my neighbors. The thing was, I worked alone in my studio. The most traffic I generated was the UPS guy dropping off art supplies twice a month. The letter demanded I cease all activities within 30 days or face daily fines of $200. It also informed me that a hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday at 7 in the evening at the community center, where I could plead my case before the HOA board. I had moved to Scottsdale specifically for the light. As a professional artist who specialized in large-scale abstract paintings, I needed space and good natural light, both of which my converted 3-car garage provided in abundance. The previous owner had already done most of the conversion work, adding skylights, climate control, and proper electrical outlets. All I did was move in my equipment and supplies. When I bought the house, I specifically asked the real estate agent about home businesses. She assured me that as long as I was not operating a retail establishment or causing disruptions, there would be no issues. I even checked the CC and Articus, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that govern the neighborhood. Nowhere did it explicitly forbid an art studio. But Patricia Morrison apparently saw things differently. I walked back into my house through the studio entrance, looking around at my workspace with fresh eyes. 3 large canvases were in various stages of completion, leaning against the walls. My paint-splattered work table sat in the center, surrounded by metal shelving units holding organized supplies. Everything was clean, professional, and completely contained within my property. The garage doors remained closed when I worked. I did not blast music. I did not have clients visiting at all hours. In fact, most of my business was conducted online. Galleries in Phoenix, Tucson, and even Los Angeles represented my work. I shipped paintings directly to buyers or delivered them myself during off-peak hours. I pulled out my phone and called my real estate attorney, Marcus Chen, whom I had used during the house purchase. His assistant put me through immediately. "Jason, good to hear from you. How's the new place working out?" Marcus asked. "That's actually why I'm calling. I just got a letter from my HOA claiming my art studio violates community guidelines." I heard Marcus sigh. "Let me guess, Patricia Morrison. You know her." Everyone in real estate knows Patricia. She's sent more HOA complaint letters than anyone else in the entire Scottsdale area. "What's her specific complaint?" I read him the relevant portions of the letter. Marcus listened quietly, then asked me to scan and email him everything, including my original CC and Articus, and any other HOA documentation I received when I purchased the property. "Do not ignore this," Marcus warned. HOAs in Arizona have significant legal power. They can place liens on your property if you do not pay fines, but we may have grounds to fight this. Send me everything, and I will review it before Thursday's hearing. After hanging up, I spent the next hour scanning documents. Then I did something I had been avoiding since moving in. I walked 2 houses down to meet my neighbor George, a retired aerospace engineer who had lived in Sagebrush Estates since the development was built 15 years ago. George was in his front yard adjusting a sprinkler system when I approached. He looked up and smiled, pushing his sun-bleached baseball cap back on his head. "Jason, right? We met briefly when you moved in." "That's right." "Listen, George, I hate to bother you, but I just received a complaint letter from the HOA about my art studio." "Has Patricia Morrison always been this aggressive about enforcement?" George's expression darkened. He stood up, brushing dirt from his knees. "Come inside. You need to hear some things about our dear HOA president." George's house was immaculate, filled with model airplanes and photographs from his career. His wife, Linda, brought us iced tea while George pulled out a folder from his home office. "Patricia moved into the neighborhood about 4 years ago," George began. "Within 6 months, she was on the HOA board. Within a year, she was president. Since then, she has made life miserable for at least a dozen homeowners." He opened the folder, showing me printed emails and letters. "She forced the Hendersons to repaint their house because she claimed their beige was not an approved shade. Cost them $8,000. She made the Ramirez family remove their vegetable garden because it was visible from the street. She even tried to fine old Mrs. Cooper for having her grandson's car parked in her driveway for more than 48 hours when he visited from college." "How is she still president?" I asked. Linda joined us, sitting down with her own iced tea. "Because most people in the neighborhood are either snowbirds who are only here part of the year, or they're too busy to get involved with HOA politics. The annual meetings barely make quorum. Patricia and her 2 friends on the board basically run everything unopposed." "Who are the other board members?" "Susan Whitmore and Karen Fletcher," George said. "They follow Patricia's lead on everything. The 3 of them are inseparable. Of course one of them was named Karen." I almost laughed despite my frustration. "What should I do?" I asked. George leaned forward. "First, do not miss that hearing. Second, bring documentation of everything. When you bought your house, what you're doing, how it does not impact anyone. Third, and this is important, talk to other neighbors. Patricia has power because people don't organize against her. But if you can show community support, it might help." Over the next few days, I followed George's advice. I knocked on doors, introduced myself properly to neighbors I had only waved to before, and explained my situation. The response surprised me. Most people were supportive. Several mentioned their own run-ins with Patricia. A few even offered to attend the hearing on my behalf. I also heard stories that made my situation seem minor. Patricia had apparently tried to ban holiday decorations that stayed up past specific dates, wanted to impose a curfew on outdoor activities after 9 p.m., and had even suggested mandatory landscaping inspections, where homeowners would be required to hire her pre-approved contractors. Marcus called me Wednesday evening with his analysis. "Good news and bad news," he began. "The bad news is that HOA boards in Arizona have broad authority to interpret their governing documents. The good news is that your original CC and Artiques do not specifically prohibit home-based businesses. There's a clause about commercial activities, but the language is vague and has an exception for professional services that do not generate significant traffic or disruption. So where do I stand? You have a solid argument. The key is proving you're not causing any actual problems. I'm going to attend the hearing with you. In the meantime, I want you to document everything. Take photos of your studio setup, print out your work schedule, get statements from immediate neighbors saying they've experienced no disruption. Build your case." Thursday evening arrived faster than I wanted. I dressed in business casual, gathered my documentation into a leather portfolio, and met Marcus in the parking lot of the Sagebrush Estates Community Center at 6:45. The community center was a modest building with a large multipurpose room, a small kitchen, and an office. Inside, about 20 folding chairs faced a table where Patricia, Susan, and Karen sat with stern expressions and matching glasses of water. Patricia was exactly what I expected. Mid-50s, perfectly styled blonde hair with carefully placed highlights, expensive athleisure wear, and an expression that suggested she smelled something unpleasant. Susan and Karen flanked her like backup singers, both slightly younger but equally composed. To my surprise and relief, about 15 neighbors had shown up, including George and Linda. They sat in the folding chairs, offering me encouraging nods. Patricia called the meeting to order at precisely 7 p.m. She read through standard HOA business, approving minutes from the previous meeting and discussing a proposal to repaint the community center trim. Then she got to my case. Item 7 on tonight's agenda concerns a violation at 4287 Sagebrush Way, owned by Jason Yates. Mr. Yates has been operating an unauthorized commercial art studio from his residence in direct violation of our community guidelines regarding commercial activities. Marcus stood up. Marcus Chen, representing Mr. Yates, may I ask what specific guideline is being violated? Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. Article 12, Section 3 of our CC and Articus clearly states that no commercial activities may be conducted from residential properties. I have a copy of the CC and Articus right here, Marcus said smoothly. Article 12, Section 3 states that commercial activities generating significant traffic, noise, or disruption are prohibited. There's also a specific exception for professional services. Mr. Yates is a professional artist working alone in a private studio. He generates no traffic, no noise, and no disruption. Several of his immediate neighbors are here tonight and can attest to this. He receives deliveries, Patricia countered. That's commercial traffic. He receives personal packages just like every other resident in this community. I assume you receive Amazon deliveries, Mrs. Morrison. A few people in the audience chuckled. Patricia's face reddened slightly. This is not about deliveries, she snapped. This is about maintaining property values and the character of our community. If we allow one person to run a business from their home, where does it end? Before you know it, we will have people opening daycare centers, repair shops, who knows what else. George stood up from the audience. Patricia, with all due respect, Jason's art studio affects nobody. His garage door stays closed. He works normal hours. Most of us did not even know he was an artist until this week. What's the real issue here? The real issue, Mr. Patterson, is maintaining standards. When people bought homes in Sagebrush Estates, they expected a certain quality of life. I stood up, deciding it was time to speak for myself. Mrs. Morrison, I bought my home specifically because it had a converted garage that would work as a studio. I checked the CC and Articus before purchasing. I asked my real estate agent about home businesses. I took every reasonable step to ensure I was in compliance. I'm not running a gallery or a retail operation. I'm an artist who needs a quiet space to work, that's all. And what about when you have clients visiting? Other artists, students? Patricia asked. I do not have clients visiting. I work with galleries who represent my pieces. I do not have students. I do not teach. I work alone, creating paintings that I ship or deliver personally. Susan spoke up for the first time, her voice sharp. We have reports of people coming and going from your property at odd hours. From whom? Marcus asked immediately. Can you provide specific dates and times? Susan and Patricia exchanged glances. "We've received complaints," Patricia said vaguely. "From whom?" Marcus repeated. "Mr. Yates has a right to know his accusers." Another neighbor, a woman named Rebecca whom I had met earlier in the week, stood up. "This is ridiculous. I live directly across from Jason. There are no odd comings and goings. Patricia, you're making things up." The meeting devolved from there. More neighbors spoke in my defense. Patricia tried to maintain control, citing procedural rules and demanding order. Karen attempted to support Patricia by reading from a printed statement about community standards, but her argument was so circular and vague that even Susan looked uncomfortable. Finally, Marcus cut through the chaos. "I'd like to propose a solution. Mr. Yates is willing to agree to reasonable restrictions. He will maintain normal business hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. He will not conduct retail sales from his property. He will not have regular clients or students visiting. In exchange, the HOA acknowledges that his private art studio, which generates no noise or disruption, is a permitted professional use under the existing CC and Articus." Patricia opened her mouth to object, but several neighbors started applauding. George stood up again. "I move that we accept Attorney Chen's proposal and close this matter." "Second," Rebecca called out. "This is not how procedures work," Patricia protested. "The board makes decisions, not the general membership." Marcus smiled. "Actually, Mrs. Morrison, according to Arizona HOA law and your own bylaws, any homeowner can call for a special vote if they can gather signatures from 20% of the community. I believe we might be close to that threshold right here in this room." It was a bluff, but an effective one. Patricia looked around the room, clearly calculating whether she could win this fight. Finally, she conferred quietly with Susan and Karen. "The board will take Mr. Chen's proposal under consideration," Patricia said stiffly. "We'll provide a written response within 10 business days." "We'll expect that in writing," Marcus replied. "And just to be clear, until this matter is officially resolved, no fines will be assessed. If the board attempts to levy fines without cause, we'll seek an injunction and possibly damages for harassment." The meeting adjourned shortly after. Several neighbors came up to shake my hand and offer support. George clapped me on the shoulder. "You handled yourself well. Patricia's used to people rolling over. She did not expect resistance." Marcus and I walked out to the parking lot together. "Do you think they'll back down?" I asked. "Probably. Patricia strikes me as a bully who backs down when confronted. But keep documenting everything, just in case. If they try to push this, we'll fight them properly." 2 weeks passed with no word from the HOA. I continued working in my studio, producing a series of paintings for a gallery show in Phoenix. The silence from Patricia and her board was both relieving and unsettling. Then, on a Friday afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. I was cleaning brushes when the doorbell rang. Opening the door, I found a woman I did not recognize. She was maybe 40, dressed casually in jeans and a loose blouse with curly brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Jason Yates?" she asked. "That's me. My name is Brenda Davis. I live over on Ironwood Drive, the next street over. I attended the HOA meeting about your studio." "Oh, right. I think I remember seeing you there. Thank you for coming, by the way," she smiled. "Actually, I'm here because I saw some of your work online. Your website has beautiful pieces. I wanted to ask if you ever do commissions." We talked for about 20 minutes. Brenda was looking for a large abstract piece for her living room, something with desert colors that would complement her southwestern decor. I showed her my current work, discussed her vision, and we agreed on a timeline and price. After she left, I felt energized. This was exactly why I loved being an artist. The creative collaboration, the challenge of bringing someone's vision to life, the satisfaction of creating something meaningful. Over the next few weeks, 2 more neighbors reached out about commissions. Word was spreading, not because I was advertising, but because people were curious about the artist in their neighborhood who had stood up to Patricia Morrison. Then something strange happened. I was working on Brenda's commission, mixing colors on my palette when my phone rang. The caller ID showed the HOA office number. I almost did not answer, but curiosity won out. "Hello, Mr. Yates, this is Karen Fletcher from the HOA board." Her voice was tentative, lacking the confidence she had displayed at the meeting. "Yes. I'm calling because, well, this is somewhat awkward. Several residents have approached the board about your artwork. There's been interest in possibly organizing some community art classes or workshops. We wanted to know if you might be interested in teaching." I was speechless for a moment. "Let me make sure I understand. The HOA complained about my studio, threatened me with fines, and now you want me to teach classes." "I know how it sounds," Karen said quickly. "But Patricia has reconsidered the situation. She saw your website too, and she thinks that community enrichment activities might be a good addition to our neighborhood amenities." "Patricia thinks this?" "Well, it was discussed at our last board meeting. Several residents suggested it. Patricia wants to discuss the details with you if you're willing to meet." This had to be some kind of trap. "Karen, I appreciate the call, but I need to think about this, and I'll probably want my attorney present for any meetings." "Of course, that's understandable. Take your time. If you're interested, just let us know." After hanging up, I immediately called Marcus and told him about the conversation. "Interesting," he said thoughtfully. "This could be legitimate. If enough residents expressed interest, Patricia might see this as an opportunity to save face. Instead of being the villain who attacked the artist, she becomes the community leader who brought cultural enrichment to the neighborhood." Or it's a trap. Possibly. But if it's legitimate, it might actually work in your favor. Let me reach out to Karen directly and set up a meeting. We'll go together and see what they're really proposing. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at the community center. This time, it was just Patricia, Karen, Marcus, and me sitting around a table in the small office. Patricia was almost pleasant, which was deeply unsettling. She had coffee ready, offered us pastries, and even complimented my work. "I looked through your website," she began. "Your paintings are quite impressive. I had no idea we had a professional artist of your caliber in our community." "Thank you," I said cautiously. "Several residents have expressed interest in art classes. We've always tried to provide amenities that enhance property values and community engagement. I think art workshops could be a wonderful addition." Marcus jumped in. "What exactly are you proposing?" Karen pulled out a folder with printed documents. "We'd like to offer monthly art workshops in the community center. 2-hour sessions, probably on Saturday mornings. We could charge a small fee to cover supplies, maybe $25 per person. Jason would teach basic painting techniques to interested residents." "And in exchange?" Marcus asked. Patricia folded her hands on the table. "In exchange, we'd like to formally approve Jason's home studio as a permitted professional use. No restrictions beyond normal noise ordinances and traffic considerations. We'd also provide him compensation for teaching, say, $50 per session." I looked at Marcus, who gave me a subtle nod indicating this was not obviously terrible. "I need to be clear about something," I said. "I'm not a trained teacher. I can share techniques and demonstrate methods, but I've never formally taught before." "That's fine," Patricia said. "This would be casual, community-focused. Nothing formal or certified, just neighbors learning from a neighbor who happens to be talented. And my studio would be officially approved. No more complaints or threats of fines, correct?" We document it formally in the HOA records. As long as you're not operating a retail gallery or creating genuine disturbances, you'd have full approval. Marcus and I excused ourselves for a private conversation in the hallway. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think Patricia realized she picked a fight she could not win, and now she's trying to spin it into a victory. If you teach a few classes, she looks good. You get official approval for your studio and avoid any future harassment. It's not a bad deal. But I really have not taught before. You collaborate with clients on commissions, right? You explain your process, demonstrate techniques. Teaching community classes is not that different. Plus, it might be fun. You'd be sharing something you love with people who are genuinely interested." Back in the office, we negotiated a few details. The classes would start in a month, giving me time to prepare. We'd do a trial run of 3 sessions to see if there was sustained interest. The HOA would handle registration and collect fees. I would provide instruction and guidance, but participants would bring their own supplies based on a list I would provide. Most importantly, Marcus insisted that the studio approval be documented immediately, not contingent on the success of the classes. Patricia agreed, and we set a date to sign formal paperwork. Walking out of the community center, I felt oddly optimistic. What started as a hostile confrontation had transformed into something potentially positive. Over the next month, I prepared for the first class while continuing my commissioned work. I researched basic teaching structures, put together supply lists, and planned simple but engaging projects. I decided to focus the first session on abstract painting with acrylics, something forgiving that would let beginners experiment without getting frustrated. The HOA sent out an email blast about the classes, and within days, all 15 spots were filled. George and Linda signed up, as did Brenda, Rebecca, and several other neighbors I had met during the controversy. The first class took place on a Saturday morning in late March. I arrived early to set up, arranging tables in a U-shape so everyone could see my demonstration area. I brought extra supplies just in case, along with examples of my own work to show different techniques. As people arrived, I noticed Patricia slip in quietly and take a seat in the back. She had not registered for the class, but she was observing. "Good morning, everyone," I began, trying to calm my nerves. "Welcome to what I'm calling Introduction to Abstract Painting. I want to be upfront that I'm not a trained teacher. I'm an artist who's going to share some techniques and hopefully help you discover something creative in yourselves." The class went better than I expected. I demonstrated color mixing, talked about composition and balance, and then let people experiment with creating their own small abstract pieces. I walked around the room, offering guidance and encouragement, helping people who got stuck and celebrating small victories. George created a bold, geometric piece with primary colors. Linda went in a completely different direction with soft, flowing shapes in pastels. Brenda, who had commissioned work from me, showed natural talent and created something genuinely interesting. 2 hours flew by. At the end, people were reluctant to leave, still adding touches to their paintings and asking questions. Several asked if I offered private lessons. One woman wanted to know about more advanced techniques. Another asked if I could do a session focused on landscapes. Patricia approached as I was cleaning up. "That was well done," she said. "You're a natural teacher." "Thank you." Everyone was enthusiastic, which made it easy. "I've been thinking," she continued, and I braced myself. "What if we expanded this? Maybe weekly classes with different skill levels. We could bring in revenue for the HOA and provide a real amenity for residents." "Patricia, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but I'm an artist first." Teaching once a month is manageable, but weekly classes would interfere with my actual work. She nodded, though I could see her mind calculating. Of course, but think about it. There's clearly demand. After she left, Rebecca came over, her completed canvas in hand. That was so much fun. I have not painted since high school. Thank you for doing this. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And thank you for standing up to Patricia at that meeting. She needed someone to push back. This neighborhood has been under her thumb for too long. Over the next 2 months, I taught the remaining trial classes. Each one filled up immediately, and the waiting list grew. People genuinely enjoyed the opportunity to be creative in a low-pressure environment. I refined my teaching approach, becoming more comfortable with instruction and feedback. What surprised me most was how much I enjoyed it. Teaching forced me to articulate aspects of my creative process that I usually did intuitively. Seeing beginners have those moments of discovery when they created something they did not know they were capable of was genuinely rewarding. My own art practice continued to thrive. The commissions from neighbors led to referrals. A gallery in Los Angeles wanted 6 new pieces for a group show. My website traffic increased, partly because students posted about the classes on social media, tagging me and showing their work. Then, about 3 months after the classes started, things got complicated again. I received an email from someone named Donald, who lived on the other side of the development. The subject line read, "Concerns about HOA art program." The email detailed complaints about the art classes. Donald claimed that the community center parking lot was too crowded on class days, that people who were not residents were attending, and that the HOA was operating an unlicensed business by charging fees for classes. I forwarded the email to Marcus. "This is interesting," he said when he called me back. "Do you know this Donald person? Never heard of him before today." The complaint about non-residents is valid if true. Are people from outside the community attending? Maybe. I do not check addresses. The HOA handles registration. I just show up and teach whoever's there. And the licensing claim is nonsense. Community centers can offer recreational classes without business licenses, but the parking complaint might have merit if it's actually causing problems. The following week, I received a formal letter from the HOA. This one was not from Patricia but from Susan Whitmore, and it was surprisingly sympathetic in tone. The letter explained that several residents, led by Donald, had filed complaints about the art program. The board was required to investigate. They wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss potential solutions. Marcus and I met with the full HOA board the next Tuesday. Donald was there too, a thin man in his 60s with an aggrieved expression and a thick folder of documents. "Thank you all for coming," Patricia began. She actually looked uncomfortable, which was unusual. "We've received complaints about the community art program. Donald, would you like to present your concerns?" Donald stood up, consulting his papers. "The art classes are creating multiple violations. First, the parking lot is at capacity during class times, preventing other residents from accessing community facilities. Second, the HOA is charging fees for services, which may require a business license. Third, non-residents are attending classes, which is a security and insurance concern." "Do you have evidence that non-residents are attending?" Marcus asked. Donald shuffled his papers. "I've observed people I do not recognize. This is a large community. Have you verified that these people do not actually live here?" "Well, no, but so you're making assumptions." Karen spoke up. "We did check registration records. 2 people who registered used addresses outside our community. They're friends of residents who told them about the classes." "That's a legitimate concern," Marcus acknowledged. "Easy to solve, though. Just verify addresses during registration." Restrict classes to residents and their guests. What about the parking issue? Donald pressed. George, who had attended this meeting too, laughed. Donald, the parking lot is never full except during the annual meeting. There are 50 spaces. Art class brings maybe 15 cars. This is a made-up problem. It's a problem for me, Donald insisted. I use the community center gym on Saturday mornings, and I should not have to park in overflow spaces because of some art class. The argument continued for another 20 minutes. Finally, I had enough. Stop, I said loudly enough to cut through the bickering. Donald, let me ask you something directly. What's your real problem here? He looked taken aback. I just explained, you explained parking, which George correctly identified as not a real issue. You mentioned non-residents, which can be easily fixed. What's the actual problem? Donald's face reddened. Fine. You want the truth. I think it's ridiculous that the HOA is bending over backward to accommodate you after you violated community guidelines. The rest of us follow the rules, but you get special treatment. There it was. This was not about parking or business licenses. This was about fairness and resentment. I understand your frustration, I said carefully, but I did not violate guidelines. I checked the CC and Articus before starting my studio. When the board claimed I was in violation, my attorney demonstrated that my private studio was permitted under existing rules. The art classes came later as a separate community amenity. I'm not getting special treatment. I'm operating within the established guidelines, just like everyone else. Then why did Patricia send you that violation letter if you were not actually violating anything? Donald challenged. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. That was a misunderstanding of the applicable rules. Was it? Or was it overreach that you're now trying to cover up by turning this guy into some kind of community art teacher? The room fell silent. Donald had just publicly called out Patricia in a way that few people dared to. Susan and Karen looked at each other nervously. Marcus leaned forward. Donald, I appreciate your concern about fair enforcement. That's legitimate. But Jason did not create this situation. The board's initial interpretation was incorrect. The art classes are a positive program that multiple residents enjoy. If you have concerns about HOA governance and fair enforcement generally, that's a separate issue that should be addressed through proper channels. What proper channels? Donald asked bitterly. Patricia controls this board. She does whatever she wants. The rest of us just have to live with it. George stood up. Then maybe it's time for new board members. Elections are coming up in 3 months. If you're unhappy with current leadership, run for a position. Get involved instead of just complaining. The meeting broke up shortly after without clear resolution. Patricia promised to implement address verification for future classes and to review parking arrangements. Donald left still angry, his thick folder of documents clutched to his chest. Walking to our cars, Marcus said. That was illuminating. Donald's not wrong about Patricia running things without much oversight, but his targeting you specifically is misplaced anger. You think he'll keep causing problems? Maybe, but you did not do anything wrong. Keep teaching your classes, keep working in your studio. If Donald wants to fight HOA governance issues, that's between him and the board. The following Saturday, I taught my scheduled class. Parking was fine. Everyone who attended was a verified resident. We worked on color theory and created small landscape studies. It was pleasant and drama-free. But over the next few weeks, I noticed increased tension in the neighborhood. George mentioned that Donald was circulating a petition about HOA governance. Some people signed it. Others refused, saying Donald was a troublemaker. Patricia, meanwhile, became increasingly visible. She organized a neighborhood cleanup day, sent out newsletters highlighting community improvements, and even attended the last 2 art classes, chatting with participants and positioning herself as a supporter of community enrichment. Then, about 6 weeks before the HOA elections, I received another unexpected visitor. I was in my studio working on a commission when the doorbell rang. Opening it, I found Donald standing there, looking awkward and uncomfortable. "Can I talk to you for a few minutes?" he asked. I considered saying no, but curiosity won. "Sure, come in." We sat in my living room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. "I owe you an apology," Donald finally said. "I've been thinking about what you said at that board meeting. You're right. My problem is not with you or your art classes. My problem is with how this HOA is run." "What changed your mind?" "I've been looking into Patricia's history more carefully. Did you know that 3 years ago, she pushed through an assessment to repave the community center parking lot? She claimed our regular contractor wanted too much money, so she found a new company that would do it cheaper." "Okay." The new company was owned by her brother-in-law. The HOA paid $50,000 for work that should have cost $30,000. Patricia steered a contract to a family member, and the HOA overpaid by at least 20 grand. I sat up straighter. "Do you have proof?" "I have the public records. HOA financial documents are technically available to all homeowners. I requested them last month. The payment to the paving company is documented. Proving the family connection took more work, but I tracked down business registration records. Patricia's sister is married to the company owner." "Have you brought this to the board?" Donald laughed bitterly. "Susan and Karen. They're Patricia's friends. They approved the contract. They're complicit." "What about the general membership? Or a lawyer?" "That's why I'm here. Your attorney seems sharp. Do you think he'd look at this?" "I do not have money for a lawyer, but if there's actual fraud, maybe he'd be interested." I called Marcus that evening and explained the situation. He agreed to meet with Donald and review the documents. 3 days later, Marcus called me back. "This is potentially serious," he said. "If Donald's information is accurate, Patricia may have violated Arizona HOA laws regarding conflicts of interest and fiduciary duty. The overpayment is significant. Board members can be held personally liable for this kind of thing." "What happens now?" "I'm going to do more investigation. If the evidence supports Donald's claims, we'll need to bring this to the membership and possibly report it to the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOAs. This could get messy." "I just wanted to paint in my garage," I said. Marcus laughed. "I know. But sometimes standing up to bullies uncovers bigger problems. Stay tuned." Over the next month, Marcus worked with Donald to build a case. I stayed out of it mostly, focusing on my art and continuing the monthly classes. But the neighborhood was buzzing with rumors. Word spread that Donald had found financial irregularities. People who had previously dismissed him as a complainer started paying attention. 2 weeks before the scheduled HOA elections, Marcus and Donald requested a special membership meeting. Arizona HOA law required the board to grant such requests if they had support from at least 10% of homeowners. They had signatures from 15%. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday evening. The community center was packed with at least 80 people, far more than the typical turnout. Patricia, Susan, and Karen sat at their usual table, looking tense. Marcus stood up and began presenting findings. He used a projector to display financial documents, business registrations, and a timeline of the parking lot contract. He explained Arizona laws regarding conflicts of interest and fiduciary duty. He demonstrated that the HOA had overpaid by approximately $23,000 and that Patricia had failed to disclose her family connection to the contractor. The room erupted in angry conversation. Patricia tried to defend herself, claiming she had not known about the family connection, that her sister had not mentioned her husband's business, that the contract had been approved by the full board. "Even if we accept that you somehow did not know your own brother-in-law owned the company," Marcus said calmly, "you still had a duty to ensure the HOA got competitive bids and fair pricing. Did you verify this company's references? Did you compare quotes from multiple contractors?" Patricia's silence was answer enough. George stood up from the audience. "I move that we remove Patricia Morrison, Susan Whitmore, and Karen Fletcher from the HOA board immediately for breach of fiduciary duty and mismanagement of community funds." "Second," multiple voices called out. "You cannot do this," Patricia protested. "There are procedures, bylaws, actually," Marcus interrupted. "Arizona HOA law specifically allows membership votes to remove board members for cause. This qualifies. We can vote right now." The vote was overwhelming. Only 3 people voted against removal, likely friends of the existing board. Patricia, Susan, and Karen were officially removed from their positions. An interim board was elected on the spot, including George, Rebecca, and a retired accountant named Phil who immediately volunteered to conduct a full audit of HOA finances. Patricia stood up, her face pale and furious. "This is not over. I'll sue for defamation." "You have ruined my reputation over a simple mistake." "It's not defamation if it's true," Marcus replied. "And if you want to discuss mistakes versus fraud, we can do that with attorneys present. I'd also note that the Arizona Department of Real Estate will be investigating this matter. They may have questions for you." Patricia grabbed her things and stormed out, followed by Susan and Karen. The remaining homeowners erupted in applause and relieved conversation. After the meeting, several people came up to thank me, which felt strange since I had not really done anything except stand up for myself initially. "You started this," Rebecca said. "If you had not fought back when Patricia came after your studio, none of us would have found the courage to question her authority." "I just wanted to paint," I said again, smiling this time. The next few weeks were surreal. Phil's audit uncovered additional questionable expenses, though nothing as blatant as the parking lot contract. The Arizona Department of Real Estate opened an official investigation. Patricia hired an attorney and stopped communicating with neighbors entirely. The art classes continued. The new board was enthusiastic and supportive, even proposing to buy some basic supplies that could be shared among participants to reduce individual costs. Class sizes increased as more people felt comfortable attending now that the community political drama had settled. My own art career reached new heights. The Los Angeles gallery sold all 6 pieces I had provided. A corporate client in Phoenix commissioned a massive installation for their lobby. My website inquiries tripled, and I was able to raise my prices to reflect demand. 3 months after Patricia's removal, the Arizona Department of Real Estate concluded its investigation. They found that Patricia had violated multiple regulations regarding financial disclosure and conflict of interest. She was fined personally and barred from serving on any HOA board in Arizona for 5 years. The paving company was forced to return $15,000 to the HOA as part of a settlement. Patricia's brother-in-law claimed he had not known about the family connections implications, which was probably true. He was just a contractor who took a job. Donald became something of a neighborhood hero. He was elected to the permanent board in the regular elections, where he focused on financial transparency and fair enforcement of rules. I continued teaching monthly art classes, which became one of the most popular community activities. Some of my early students progressed to the point where they started displaying their work at local art fairs. George discovered a genuine talent for abstract expressionism and actually sold a few pieces. Linda started a neighborhood art show where residents could display their creative work. On a warm evening in October, almost a year after receiving that first complaint letter from Patricia, I sat in my studio putting finishing touches on a painting destined for a gallery in Tucson. The garage door was open to let in the desert breeze. I could hear kids playing in the street, someone grilling dinner, the normal sounds of a neighborhood alive and functioning. My phone rang. It was Brenda, whose commission had been one of the first to start the positive chain of events. "Jason, I just wanted to let you know that my cousin is moving to Scottsdale next month. She's a photographer. I told her about our neighborhood and the supportive community we have for artists. I hope that's okay." "That's great," I said. "Tell her to look me up when she moves in." After hanging up, I thought about the journey from that threatening letter to this moment. I had been angry and scared when Patricia first came after my studio. Fighting back had seemed risky. But standing up for myself had not only protected my own rights, but had exposed corruption and improved the entire community. The art classes had taught me that I enjoyed teaching, that sharing creativity was rewarding in ways different from but complementary to creating my own work. The commissions from neighbors had strengthened my connection to the place I lived. The controversy had built relationships with people like George, Marcus, and Rebecca, who had become genuine friends. Sometimes conflict is necessary. Sometimes the hardest thing, standing your ground when someone tries to push you around, is exactly what needs to happen. I finished the painting and stepped back to evaluate it. The piece was bold and dynamic, full of movement and color. It represented desert energy, the vibrant life that thrives in harsh conditions. It was some of my best work. Outside, someone called a greeting. I walked to the studio door and saw George and Linda strolling by on their evening walk. "Looking forward to this weekend's class," George called. "I'm working on a new series." "Can't wait to see it," I replied. They waved and continued down the street. I returned to my studio, closing the garage door against the cooling evening air, and began preparing canvases for tomorrow's work. The Scottsdale night settled around Sagebrush Estates, peaceful and promising. Patricia Morrison was gone, her attempt to control and intimidate having collapsed under scrutiny. Donald had found purpose in accountability and good governance. The community had learned to stand up for itself. And I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I loved, in a home and neighborhood that had become genuinely mine through the process of defending it. Sometimes the fight you do not want becomes the thing that transforms your life in unexpected and positive ways. Sometimes standing up to a bully does not just protect you, but helps an entire community find its voice. I picked up my brush and got back to work, grateful for the space, the light, and the hard-won piece that made creativity possible.